Attention listeners, Aftersight's annual hike is coming up on July 27th.
It was a really good experience for me.
Visit aftersight.org/hike and become an audio trekker today.
That hike today gave me so much courage.
You're listening to an AINC original podcast. We believe you don't have to do life without a compass. Let us be your guide on this amazing journey. Welcome to Navigating Life with Vision Loss.
Hello, I'm Kim Wardlow, and I'm your host for NLVL. Welcome, everyone. We are in the month of talking about mental health. But before we get started today, I just want to remind you about our Audio Trekkers hike that is going to take place on July 27th at Myers Gulch. And we do provide sighted guides if you need one. You can register for the hike at our website, which is aftersight, AFTERSIGHT.org/hike. So I hope you'll join us. This is our fourth annual hike, and everyone seems to get a little bit bigger and better and more fun. So hopefully you'll join us. And also, just so you know, too, if you are a sports fan, whether you enjoy playing sports or just learning about sports, Game Changers is launching June 7th, and it is going to focus on adaptive sports. So we hope you'll join us for that. Today, I am joined by Beth Gustin, who I've known for more years than I probably want to say because it's been a long time. But I'm really happy to have Beth with us here today. Last week, we had talked to Bill Lundgren, the host of Blindside, on our show, and talked about addiction. So this week, we're continuing mental health, and we're talking to Beth about loneliness and what it can mean for someone feeling loneliness, how to navigate through that. Beth, besides being somebody I've known for years, she is an experienced bereavement therapist, a certified pet loss grief specialist, and an EMDR certified therapist and consultant. And she has 16 years of professional experience supporting folks to reconnect with hope and finding a sense of self. Welcome, Beth. And do you want to tell folks any more about your practice and what you do?
Sure. And I'm laughing because as you talk about how long you've known me, I also talk about I'm actually been practicing for 18 years. So
18 years. I'm sorry.
No, that's okay.
I'm skipped like 2 years.
Wow, I'm old. All right.
Not as old as me, though, I'm sure.
So as far as the practice, I offer in-person or virtual, and I can work with clients who reside in the state of Colorado. And I specialize in grief and loss, whether it be human death, pet death or loss, or adjusting to living with a disability such as vision loss, because there is a grief process that we experience there as well. And I also do some work with trauma, given that I do have the EMDR, which stands for Eye Movement Desensitization and Reprocessing, which is a form of therapy to help individuals who are currently experiencing impacts due to their past trauma, and it's affecting their daily functioning.
Okay, well, thank you for expanding on that and letting folks know what you do. Today we're talking about loneliness. What do you see in your practice, how loneliness comes into the different processes that you work with?
I think it depends on what the individuals are coming in for, but I definitely see it when someone is experiencing loss of sight and their friendships tend to change, their ability to easily access community events can change, and so it leads to more isolation, which can lead to loneliness. I also see it in the grief and loss side of things. If someone's pet or service dog or emotional support animal has died, then there's loneliness there because that connection they had is gone. The house is empty. And I also see it with the human loss side of things, in that if someone's life partner has died, or a best friend or a parent, there can be a profound sense of loneliness, again, because of that lack of connection in the grief process.
Again, see where grief and loneliness could be very connected.
Yes, they're very intertwined.
Mm-hmm. We have an email from a listener named Justine, and she has written in, I lost my partner of 12 years and have been trying to find myself again. The loneliness that I feel is almost unbearable sometimes. Sometimes I think I see them, but I know they aren't there. Do you have any suggestions for getting through this?
First of all, thank you for your question and for writing in. And this is a tough question to answer without knowing a few more specifics, depending on how recent your loss is going to impact your grief process and where you're at in your grief journey. But the short answer would be seek support, whether it's finding a grief group you can join, talking to a therapist. If your friends are reaching out to you to go do things, try to say yes to something, so you can just start to build a sense of connection. But at the same time, it's also allowing yourself to feel the grief and acknowledge the feelings, and to give that grief a voice and a witness, so that you aren't holding on to all of that. Because if we don't express our grief, the cheesy phrase is, if you don't feel, you don't heal. And so if you don't start to feel everything, you're not going to heal and be able to move forward.
So Beth, looking at that, and again, this kind of connection with the loneliness and the grief, are there things in a broader sense folks can do if they're grieving and they're feeling lonely? I'm just thinking, sometimes we can feel lonely, as you said, if we become more isolated, but also I know I've even experienced, we can feel lonely even when we're in a crowd of people.
Absolutely, yes.
And just in dealing with that, feeling like, well, I'm trying to go out and do things, but still experiencing that loneliness.
Loneliness is really tricky, in my opinion, because it comes from either a perceived or a real lack of connection. So, like you just said, we can be lonely in a crowd. We can be lonely with our friends, lonely with our romantic partners. And a lot of that, I think, comes from this sense of not belonging, not feeling like you belong, not feeling like you have something to contribute, not feeling like you can relate to those around you. And so I think part of it is taking a step back, and depending on kind of what is causing loneliness. So if it is a death, then thinking about, we are a changed person and our identity changes after a loss. And so trying to work on, who are we now and who do we want to be now? How do you want to present in the world? If it's coming more from that, what's kind of called a perceived lack of connection, where you have a support system, but you still feel lonely, it's looking more at, have your interests changed? Have you outgrown your friendships? Because that can happen. And then trying to figure out, okay, what does interest you now? There's something called a leisure inventory I'll often give my clients to help them figure out, what do you like to do? And it lists just 100 different random things, whether it's the zoo or museums or crosswords or walks, or having hobbies that are with people versus hobbies where you prefer to actually be by yourself, but you have a sense of accomplishment. But it helps you kind of pinpoint what you might like to do, and it gives you a place to sort of start exploring, okay, if I know that I like books, is there a book club that I can join? So I've got that common interest. So I'm not fighting so hard to build a connection, but I have something in common to start the connection.
Right. Kind of start some conversations,
Right.
Help to not be so awkward.
Right.
In terms of a person who is losing or has lost vision, I also see that sense of, I feel like I'm not the same person that I was.
Right.
And with all those changes. And could you speak to that specific case a bit of somebody who's struggling with their vision loss and trying to kind of figure out their life now? Like, as you said, maybe their friends are not sure how to react, and that can bring loneliness as well.
It absolutely can, and I think it does. And part of this is we don't know what we don't know. And so for losing our sight, one of the biggest things I try to help connect my clients with is resources. Because once we know what our options are, what the resources are, we can then start to utilize them, and that helps us feel more connected and gives us more sense of belonging. I think I'm a big fan of support groups because it helps us realize we're not the only ones that are feeling this way or experiencing losing our sight. And many have come before us that can sort of help say, I've been there and you're going to be okay. I also think it's a lot of educating others, which can be very exhausting and cause loneliness because we just want someone who understands us. And it's hard to find the people who do. And so again, the support groups are helpful. If you've got one friend or someone in your life who you feel like really gets it, then trying to confide more in that person or see if that person can help you expand, again, your support system. Because the biggest goal, I think, when combating loneliness is to find community so we feel like we belong and we're understood.
And I can see where that might be, as you said, through a support group or maybe even meeting people, doing some training to learn, new skills, travel skills,
Absolutely.
other types of things like that. Are there other things you suggest to your clients if they're losing vision and they're kind of feeling lonely and unsettled, just not feeling like they have the same connections anymore?
I think one of the biggest challenges I experience with my clients and also then suggest is, okay, let's look at transportation, because losing our independence and our ability to drive and our sense of freedom is one of the hardest obstacles, I think, to overcome. And so if we can find transportation resources that work for us, then we have the ability to be out in public and go places we like to go. But I also think it goes back to, like I said earlier, allowing yourself to grieve. Losing our sight is a huge loss, and we may have the same interests that we used to have, but we can't do them anymore, or we have to do them differently and they take longer. And so I do think it is about finding alternative ways to do things, find volunteer organizations that can help you start to gain the skills you need. If you can't work with, Division of Book Rehab, for example, maybe getting in contact with other agencies that are local to you that can teach you the skills you need so you can stay independent. And we do a lot of work around acceptance of it's going to look different now, but you're still able to be a person who contributes to society and who still has a full, hopefully healthy, happy life.
Right. And just building that confidence may help in building new relationships too.
Right.
Well, just as loneliness and grief can be so closely related, often loneliness and depression can also be closely related. We have a listener who's written in, I really get confused with loneliness and depression, and I think I'm treating one when I'm treating the other. How do I know which one I'm feeling and when?
Yep, another kind of tricky and good question, because depression can definitely cause loneliness, and loneliness can definitely be a part of depression. The biggest difference is loneliness is what we call transient, or it's short-term in hopefully most cases, whereas depression is what's called a diagnosable mental health disorder, and it includes a number of other symptoms, including things like low mood, low energy, sleeping too much, appetite changes, thoughts of self-worthlessness, things like that. Whereas if it's just loneliness, which is huge, we typically don't have those other things that are persistent and long-lasting that go along with it.
Are there other types of conditions that a person might be experiencing or may need to seek treatment for those conditions, and perhaps they're feeling like, oh, I'm just lonely. I just need to get out more or something, when maybe it isn't just loneliness.
I think oftentimes anxiety can play a big role in this. Social anxiety is what I'm thinking about. If we are afraid to leave our house, that's going to increase loneliness. Even though we want to get out, we can't. And depression and anxiety can both kind of cause this sense of, well, I have the want or the desire, but I don't have the energy, or I don't have the confidence. I don't have, there's too much fear that keeps me home. It's really hard for a lot of people, especially I think as we're older, to make friends, which can cause loneliness. We're not forced to be in a classroom 8 hours a day with other students. Or at work in some cases, because everything has gone remote nowadays. So it's really hard to build that in-person connection, which we all need that. Online is great. And I always encourage people, if you can't make friends, out in the world, can you at least have an online community where you feel like you belong and have support? But the goal is to get out and find that community in person, because we all feel much better, in my opinion, if we have that in-person connection.
Okay, that was going to be my next question, was virtual versus in person. And to me, they always seem very different. I'm appreciative that I can do things virtually, but it doesn't seem quite the same. Like there's additional benefits to seeing somebody in person.
Right. It is not the same. And for me personally, I offer in-person and telehealth, and I will do both happily, but I prefer in-person because there's something about the energy that I think is exchanged, or the proximity of having someone else, in the room with you, or having anything in person, to me is better and healthier, but we have to start somewhere. And so if we can't get ourselves to go out right away, can we work up to that? And it's really hard to talk to people, I think. I think the pandemic really has shifted, I think, and I'm not quite sure how we come back from that, or why it's been so hard to come back from that for a lot of people. But it's real, and the anxiety, especially around social situations, has definitely increased since then. And I think it's just harder for us to feel like we have the confidence to start conversations and build those in-person connections. I often recommend meetup.com as a resource for a lot of people, because if you can find a group that's doing something you enjoy, then again, hopefully it takes some of that pressure off for you to make that small talk. But you have to get there.
Right. For a person that may be experiencing some anxiety about going out and getting together with friends or groups in person, do you think that starting online, like I know there are peer groups, there are online book clubs, starting online can be not only, I guess, first step, but a little bit easier if a person is nervous about engaging in conversation or starting, just because there is a little bit of different distance just from the screen, that you're not physically in the same place.
Right. There's more anonymity behind the screen, which can make it easier for us to build those connections, have those conversations. And I do it. If that's comfortable to you, start there, but don't stop there. And I think also we have a lot of negative thought loops that get in the way. We think we can't do something, so we don't, or it's overwhelming, so we don't. And if we can work on those negative thoughts and really work on shifting them, because most of us can think back to a time in our lives where we were successful at having conversations and being out in community and finding people that we can connect with. And if we can remember what that's like, it helps us over time become more successful to do it now. Not that easy, I know that, but we can do this. It just takes a lot of work.
It does. And it could be a good intermediate step for someone who does want to get out, but they are trying to deal with the transportation issue. Right. If they've lost vision and they're learning how to navigate now and get places.
The other piece I think about, though, too, is I I tend to work with some older individuals who don't do technology well. And that learning curve is really hard for them if they haven't had to use a screen reader before, or they haven't had to learn how to use magnification devices before. I think they're further disconnected and isolated from this online community piece. And so, I don't always have the answers, but finding ways to make that online option more accessible to them. And I think we all can agree that it's really hard to build peer connections in a Zoom room because you can't really easily talk amongst yourselves. You just talk over each other. And so, again, I do highly encourage in person as much as possible because you have more ability to actually meet people and build friendships and connections. Whereas on a Zoom meeting, I'm picking on Zoom, but any format, you're typically just listening.
Well, I know recently I've been working with, I'm really just trying to be a support with our Teams platform with a group, the Deafblind Action Team. And they've just started, and that was one of the things when they were asking people what they would like from the group, and the social activities and being able to meet in person with other deafblind individuals was very high, if not top of the list. So it really emphasized to me the importance of figuring out how to get together in person.
I've heard that same from other individuals. I mainly work with clients. I work with all different types of clients, but my clients that I mainly work with in the visually impaired community have been requesting the same thing. Where do I find an in-person group? And there's not a lot of them to my knowledge. And, if your agency covers the whole state or multiple counties, that's even harder to put together.
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah, the benefit and the downfall of virtual meetings, you can have people from such wide geographic areas, but then it's hard for them to ever meet in person.
The one thing, and I haven't seen as much of this with the peer support groups I'm familiar with, but I know you can do breakout rooms. And I've often thought about, it wouldn't be the same, but maybe it's creating breakout rooms in your online events of groups of like 4 to 5 people and giving people 15 minutes just to start talking amongst themselves. And yes, it'll be awkward at first, but I have found in my experiences with online virtual communities that can help, because at least you're not having to speak to a whole entire room, and you have some time to get to know somebody on a little bit different level and exchange information if you want to, which can help build connection.
I agree. I think that can be really helpful. In your practice, do you see any differences? I know you mentioned with some of your older adult clients, there can be difficulty. They're experiencing loneliness and they're not as technologically savvy. And so even connecting with something virtually is difficult for them. Do you see other differences with different ages of individuals?
I do. Overall, and I'm speaking in general terms here, overall, the older individuals don't have as big of a support system because as we get older, many of our loved ones unfortunately die, as happens. And so typically the younger and middle-aged clientele do have larger support systems. That's not always the case. I do have some younger clients who are very much struggling to build that sense of community and connection. But overall, that's a big difference that I see.
Is there anything else you would recommend to somebody who feels like they're experiencing loneliness and they're trying to, maybe they've even moved? I know that happens as well. People, they move for a job or they move even for college, but you're just having to start over with all new relationships, which can be overwhelming.
I recommend to start small, but also challenge yourself. So, for example, if you are living in a new environment and don't know your surroundings, challenge yourself to try to go for a walk if you can, even once a week, to start learning what's around you, or challenge yourself to call up the local rec center and find out what they offer. But just do one thing a week if you can. One thing a day is awesome, but do one thing a week to help yourself to start to build your sense of community and find the activities and things that you would like to get involved in. And it's becoming comfortable with the uncomfortable feeling of anxiety and knowing that you've built connections before. Sometimes they haven't lasted. People come and go out of our lives for so many reasons, but it doesn't typically reflect on us. And just giving yourself that compassion and that grace to rebuild your community. But start small so you can achieve success.
Any other tips for successfully overcoming loneliness? As you said, true loneliness is something that would be temporary and not long-term.
Right. If you can remind yourself of that, it feels like it's lasting forever. It feels like it's never going to change. But it will. But it does take some work on your part to start reaching out because people don't know what we need. And so we have to be able to advocate for ourselves and start to at least explore, the options. And I always tell clients, sometimes a therapist is the only connection you've got initially, but that one person can start to be kind of a foundation to help you reach further and build your support system. You only have one friend or, maybe it's a church, but you're not super involved. Can you get more involved? You start with what you have and expand outward.
And I guess finally, I'm just wondering if I'm a friend or a relative, if I have a loved one that is experiencing loneliness and I am trying to encourage them, to do some of these things and to get out, maybe that person is near me, but maybe not. Maybe they're near me and I'm feeling like I am the only person that they're connecting with and trying to help them to expand. Do you have any advice for someone who's trying to encourage another person to build some relationships to be able to overcome their loneliness?
That can be a tough situation. And I think, don't stop inviting them to things. So keep asking them to join you on certain things. If you know what their interests are, maybe you can do a little bit of research and say, hey, I just found, there's a hiking group in your area. You like to hike, would you like me to go with you the first time? Or would you like me to connect you with the group? But just being a resource for them and really trying to continue to encourage them to try something new. Hey, there's a free festival and I know crowds are hard, but let's go check it out early in the morning before it gets too busy. Whatever it might be, but be creative and don't give up.
Okay. That's good advice. I think it can be tough. I'm just thinking of situations, even if you have a parent, you've had one parent pass away, you may be grieving, but your remaining parent is also grieving and trying to encourage them to continue on. And there's just so many times I think we're trying to encourage people as well. We may be experiencing our own loneliness, but also trying to encourage others to be able to continue on with their life and not get stuck in that place.
If they're unwilling or unable to leave the house, then maybe it's like, hey, I brought donuts this morning and we're going to have breakfast. You'll just show up unannounced or, make an effort
bring the party to them.
Bring the party to them. Or once a week, you just make an effort. We're going to do breakfast every Saturday morning at 8, and what we typically find is people might come kicking and screaming. It's really hard for them, but they enjoy it once they're there. Mm-hmm. And I think it's just getting over that hurdle of getting out of the house, getting past the front door, getting in a community with people. And it can be really hard to put ourselves out there and not have people be as enthusiastic to meet us or not make conversation with us. It feels horrible, but we have to keep trying because chances are there's someone else in that group who's feeling just as lonely as you are and doesn't know how to connect. And you could be that lifeline for them if you get there.
So true. Well, Beth, I appreciate so much the information you've given us today. Any final words that you'd like to share with our listeners?
Thank you for having me on the podcast, and always happy to be a resource or support to anyone if I'm able to do that. So happy to help, and always feel free to reach out.
And if a person is feeling like it may be beneficial to connect with a counselor such as yourself, is there a website or somewhere where they could connect with you?
Yeah, so my website is transitioningthroughchange.com. And there's a contact form on there. My phone number is on there, email address is on there. So there's multiple ways to reach me if you do choose to reach out to me. And if you are looking for therapists, there are lots of different directories out there. Therapyden.com is one. Psychologytoday.com is another. Inclusivetherapists.com is another. There's lots of places to find support.
That's great. Do any of those resources help folks know? I'm just thinking if they are a person who is blind or has some level of vision loss, to know if a particular therapist or counselor has worked with blind or low vision individuals.
So I have not gotten this to work for me, but I believe Psychology Today has some filters where you can search for something called Blind Allied, where the therapist might have experience with either lived or professional working with those who are visually impaired or blind, as an example. But I don't know if the other two sites do. I have not seen that option. I think word of mouth is the best support there, or if you have a community, like other agencies who work with visually impaired individuals that you're involved in, maybe asking them if they know somebody might be a better bet.
And just not to give up.
That's the biggest message.
The support you need.
Yeah, don't give up. I know it's not easy. I also know that if we wait a few minutes, things do change. If we can distract ourselves and go do something that we gain enjoyment from, that's going to help lift our mood and our emotions. And just keep trying. Anything you do is going to help.
Great. Well, thank you, Beth, for those encouraging final words. We hope that you all have found this to be encouraging for you. If you have questions or any feedback, please feel free to contact us either by phone at 720-712-8856 or by email at feedback@aftersight.org. We always appreciate your feedback or any questions that you have. We will try to pass on any questions to the appropriate person if you send those to us. Again, thank you, Beth, for joining me today. This is one of our episodes for Mental Health Month, and we hope that you continue to join us and that the information that we've provided today helps you to navigate your life with vision loss.